Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. I like this verse a lot. Besides, it's true. It's very relevant to each one of us. And Baladev Vidyabhusan, who's pictured here, has written in his Prameya Ratnavali. Prameya Ratnavali is a description of the essential teachings found in the Bhagavatam and found in Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And nice. Yadrashi bhavana samye siddhir bhavati tadrashi. Again. Yadrashi bhavana samye siddhir bhavati tadrashi. And it explains, the following explanation is found in the Kautmiya recension of the Vedas. Important. The degree to which one engages in devotional activities in this world determines his status in the next world. The Smriti Shastra also confirms the extent to which one is devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead determines the degree of his spiritual perfection. Profound, huh? This is an often quoted verse that our realization, Krishna gives realization. Where does realization come from? We could say it comes from Super Soul, but everyone has a realization about something. As we were driving in, I was seeing all these big cactuses. And then I was told this is kind of a new neighborhood, so that somebody put them in there, planted a big 5-foot cactus. And there's something, anyway, there's the science of cactus growing and how many years it takes for a cactus to grow 1 inch. So how do they know to grow 1 inch? How does anybody know anything? How does a thief know to steal? How does anybody know how to do anything? And then in spiritual life, the same principle applies. Super Soul gives, according to the investment that we place in our devotional activities. There's the activities and the consciousness behind the activities. The degree to which one engages in devotional activities in this world determines his status in the next world. Confirmed. The extent to which one is devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead determines the degree of his spiritual perfection. In this story of Mucukunda, he achieved perfection. And he achieved perfection because of association of a devotee. The devotee that he gave him association is Gargamuni. Gargamuni is the chief priest of the Yadu dynasty. He's the same Gargamuni who did the name-giving ceremony for Krishna. And Mucukunda, we'll see as the story unfolds. Long, long ago, he received an astrological evaluation of his chart. And Gargamuni said that he's going to meet Krishna. Your chart says. And then he was eager to hear about Krishna, so he heard about Krishna from Gargamuni, who knows about Krishna. And from that, he became a devotee. But he very seriously, without having seen Krishna, like us, without having seen Krishna, his devotion for Krishna grew and grew and grew. He was always thinking of Krishna. He was a king, busy doing what kings do. We're busy doing what we do. But he was also very busy in thinking of Krishna. So Krishna came, not just because it was predicted in his chart, but because he had association, and he took it nicely. So note the Sanskrit, Yadrashi bhavana samye siddhir bhavati tadrashi. Very similar to a verse that's in Sri Brahma Samhita. Yadrashi bhavana yasya siddhir bhavati tadrashi. Not the same, but close. The scriptures say that the type of perfection one attains depends on the thoughts one has while engaged in spiritual practice. That's Bhakti Siddhanta. So, tomorrow morning, most likely all of us, maybe the children will see, but at least the adults will be chanting Hare Krishna. The type of perfection one attains depends on the thoughts one has while engaged in spiritual practice. So, spiritual practice is what we do. And what's the type or of thoughts that we have while engaged in spiritual practice? Here's what Bhakti says on this same verse. The perfection that one attains corresponds exactly to the type of meditation performed at the time of sadhana. So these are comments on Baladev Vidyabhusan's Prameya Ratnavali, and it has everything to do with the story of Mucukunda. Jiva Goswami writes in commentary on Rupa Goswami's writing, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It said in scriptures that some old carpenter, Vardaki, living in Hastinapur, worships a deity form of Krishna as his son on the instructions of Narada Pancharatra, and attained the perfection of having Krishna as his son. Now, he's not a Brahmana. He's a carpenter. He living in Hastinapur. Doesn't say exactly when, but sometime. And he followed the scriptures, and he attained Krishna as his son. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary, the carpenter attained perfection, Siddho Bhut, during the pastime in which Brahma stole the calves. At that time, Krishna became the sons of all the cowherd men. So this was before Krishna's pastime of appearing. And when Krishna appeared, this carpenter who worships a deity in that kind of meditation achieved that perfection. How did that perfection come? He took birth in Vrindavan. Krishna became his son during that 1 year. So how does that, the teaching is very nice. It certainly relates to how we should carry out our sadhana. And it pertains also to the story of Mucukunda. Gargamuni gave his association to Mucukunda. Mucukunda received bhakti and became his devotee. And he worshipped Krishna in his mind with the anticipation of meeting Krishna. So supposing an astrologer told you, or supposing reading Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada told you, you do this and you will meet Krishna. So that whatever that is that you attain, the perfection that you attain or the realization that you attain depends so much upon how you engage in your sadhana. So here's the story of the deliverance of Mucukunda, chapter 51. And it starts with Krishna's entering into Mathura. Akrura brought him. This shows Krishna dealing with the mad, intoxicated elephant, Kuvalyapita, a huge guy, and Krishna finished him. Kuvalyapita tried to finish Krishna, but went the other way around. Krishna protected and broke off his tusk and gave one of the tusks to Balaram, and they entered into the wrestling arena of Chanur and Mushtaka, and Krishna won. Balaram over there on the right, he's fighting with Chanura, and over on the left, and the far left side, that's the brothers. Chanur and Mushtaka had 3 brothers, and they're watching, sitting up on that seat up there on the upper right. That's Kamsa, really intent on seeing what's going on. Here's a close-up of Krishna fighting with Mushtaka. And you can see even better his brothers over on the side. Look closely, you can see the perspiration coming down the side of Mushtaka's face. Very, very powerful. At this time, Krishna's 10 years, 7 months. So think of some boy that's 10 years, 7 months. Big mismatch. But Krishna finished him. And after Krishna finished him, he finished Kamsa. And after he finished Kamsa, he smashed him so hard with his fist that Kamsa, powerful as anything, you see in the background, there's Balaram holding one of the elephant tusks. Krishna finished him. And to prove to everybody that he was finished, by his hair, he dragged him throughout the wrestling arena. And flowers were showered upon Krishna, and wicked Kamsa is dead. So the first thing Krishna did was he went to the prison house where his mother and father, Vasudeva and Devaki, were, released them from their chains, and he arranged for Ugrasena to be re-enthroned as the king, because Kamsa was his son, and Kamsa removed him from the throne and sat on the throne himself. So Kamsa's gone. Ugrasena again becomes king. Now comes the retaliation. There's Jarasandha, who had his 2 daughters come and cry, "Take revenge, take revenge." Now, how did what's a little bit of Jarasandha's history? Jarasandha was the king of Magadha, and his father, Brihadrath, had no son, although he had 2 queens. Both were daughters of the king of Kashi. So what did he do? Brihadrath went to the forest in order to, by engaging in austerities, hopefully he would get the capacity to have sons. While he was in the forest, he met a rishi, Chandra Kaushika Rishi. And hearing the story from King Brihadrath, he gave Brihadrath a mango for his co-wives, which would enable them to bear a son or a child. So he took the mango back to his co-wives. He cut it in half, gave half to one queen, half to the other queen, and in due course of time, they both had a child. But much to their surprise, it was half a child. And they took their half a child to King Brihadrath and asked what to do, what happened. And he suggested they take the 2 halves and throw them into the forest. Well, this illustration doesn't show forest, but a demon, she-demon, named Jara found these two halves, and out of curiosity, the she-demon put the two halves together, and it became one child. Now, somehow she knew that these were the children of Brihadrath, so she brought now the joined parts of the body to King Brihadrath and made one request. Please name the child after her. So that's how he got the name, Jarasandha. Now Jarasandha, had two daughters, Ashti and Prapti. And there's a whole long, nice, interesting story of how it happened. But Jarasandha married his two daughters to Kamsa. And then these two daughters, after Kamsa was killed, went to their father and begged revenge. And Jarasandha made this declaration: I will not only destroy Krishna, but the entire Yadu dynasty, very strong. And he's a powerful, very powerful king and soldier. So he gathered together 13 Akshohini divisions of soldiers. And here's the numbers: 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 109,350 infantry, 65,610 cavalry, the soldiers on horses, like you see in that lower right corner, chariots, soldiers on horses, or on the left side, soldiers on horses. And he had 13 of those. And with those 13 Akshohini divisions of soldiers, he came marching defiantly to the gates of Mathura and challenged Krishna. So what did Krishna do? Krishna smiled. He turned to Balaram and said, let's go. We don't need the Yadu army, just the two of us. So he summoned two celestial chariots, and he and Balaram went onto the battlefield, and just the two of them annihilated those 13 divisions of Akshohini warriors. 13 divisions. Big bloody mess. And told Jarasandha to go home. We heard what his ministers said, so he came again 17 times with so many soldiers. Each time more divisions, more Akshohini divisions. And each time, 17 times, Krishna and Balaram, pictured here, they defeated everybody. Just the two of them. But he was very determined. It's a nice lesson. I mean, Jarasandha is teaching us a lesson. Be determined. Don't be determined in opposition to Krishna, but even if there's a setback, you continue with determination. Look up on the top, that's the demigods observing these battles. On the 18th time, Kaliyavana came from Afghanistan. The Yavana kingdom was in that direction. He came with 3 million Yavana soldiers sent by Narada. Sent by Narada means Narada was visiting in his kingdom, Kaliyavana's kingdom, and Kaliyavana wanted to know, who's the most powerful ruler on this earth? He said, the Yadu kings. Not that he sent them, but now here's a description, interesting description, how Kaliyavana became Kaliyavana. In the Vishnu Purana, there's this history. One of Gargamuni's sons was named Gargya. And Gargya was insulted by his brother-in-law, his wife's brother. Doesn't say who he was or who she was, but his brother-in-law insulted him. He called him a eunuch. And it was done in the front of some of the Yadu dynasty leaders, and they laughed. So Gargya got into a get-back mentality. He went to South India, underwent very severe austerities. His austerity was he ate only powdered iron. Yummy. For 12 years. And it wasn't offered to Krishna either. Powdered iron for 12 years to perform an austerity for Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva gave him the benediction he requested, which was he would have a son who would bring terror to the Yadu dynasty. So later what happened, Gargya was invited by the Yavana king It was part of the get back motivation. inside the cave that he ran into was Mucukunda. And when Mucukunda, who was the son of Mandata from the Surya dynasty or the Ikshvaku dynasty, he immediately, the Kaliyavana burst into flames. What happened was when he came into the cave, he just saw somebody lying on the ground. He thought Krishna was tired, so he kicked him. But it wasn't Krishna, it was Mucukunda. And how that happened, that Mucukunda, by opening his eyes, went deeply asleep, had to do with the powerful nature of Mucukunda. Mucukunda was a king on earth in the Ikshvaku line, and there was a battle between the demigods and the demons, and the demigods were being defeated. So they came to Mucukunda, asked him to come and help, so he went to help them. And for a long time, day and night, he was fighting against the demons. Finally, Kartikeya showed up to assist the demigods, and so he was relieved. Mucukunda was relieved. The demigods were very grateful. They said, please request from us any benediction that's within our power to give, and it's yours. So he said, let me just rest. But he made a little condition. Let me rest in such a way that if anyone disturbs me before I've finished resting, immediately when I open my eyes, they'll burst into flames. And commentary says he asked like that because he didn't want the demigods to come and bother him again. So they gave the benediction. Kartikeya and Indra gave that benediction that he requested. So when Kaliyavana kicked him, he woke up and immediately burst into flames. Now, in this section, there's a nice description of the characteristics of Mucukunda. Not only he was a big fighter, but he was very devoted to supporting brahmanas. He had very elevated qualities. He was true to his vow. Whenever he vowed something, he would maintain his vow. He was selfless. He left his unrivaled kingdom on earth and all of the other desires that are involved in kingdoms just to assist the demigods. Big sacrifice. And it is said one of his qualities is Devotee. He was very wise. And he was very humble. And most importantly was this benediction that Gargamuni gave that one day he would see Krishna. Where does the determination that Mucukunda had to see Krishna? It came from a devotee. Now we have some idea about Krishna, each one of us, and how strong is that determination that we have to be in our relationship with Krishna, or see Krishna, or be with Krishna. Remember back those first examples of teaching given by Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami and Baladev Vidyabhusan's teachings and so forth. How strong is our determination to achieve the fulfillment of what bhakti is meant and capable of giving? It comes from devotees and the quality of that association we have with elevated devotees. So here's another painting showing Kaliyavana being burnt and burst into flames. And after he was burst into flames, now Mucukunda is wide awake. But he saw in that cave this effulgent light. So he started asking questions. Who are you? Natural question. Now, this is an interesting painting. It shows Mucukunda really tall and Krishna kind of much shorter. And that has to do with how long he was fighting. He was fighting in the heavenly planets, and time passing in the passing in the heavenly planets. So many years and yugas passed on Earth. So he was tall because he was from another yuga compared to Krishna. That's what Vishnu Purana says. Vishnu Purana. So he wanted to know, who is this? Who are you? So I'm going to read. This is verses 36 through 43, where Krishna is saying who he is. The Supreme Lord said, "My dear friend, I have taken thousands of births, lived thousands of lives, and accepted thousands of names. In fact, my births, activities, and names are limitless, and thus, even I cannot count them. After many lifetimes, someone might count the dust particles on the earth. But no one can ever finish counting my qualities, activities, names, and births. O King, the greatest sages enumerated my births and activities, which take place throughout these 3 phases of time, but never do they reach an end to them. Nevertheless, my friend, I will tell you about my current birth, name, and activities. Kindly hear. Some time ago, Lord Brahma requested me to protect religious principles and destroy the demons who were burdening the earth. Thus I descended in the Yadu dynasty in the home of Anakundundubi. That's another name for Vasudeva. Indeed, because I am the son of Vasudeva, people call me Vasudeva. I have killed Kalanemi, reborn as Kamsa, as well as Pralamba and other enemies of the pious. And now, O King, this barbarian has been burnt to ashes by your piercing glance. Since in the past you repeatedly prayed to me, I have personally come to this cave to show you my mercy, for I am affectionately inclined to my devotees. It's the fruit of his absorption in prayer and meditation upon Krishna, although, like us, he had never seen him. Now, choose some benediction from me, O saintly king. I will fulfill all your desires. One who has satisfied me need never again lament. Nice. That's not only answering his question, he gave more than his question. He gave him a blank check and told him, just fill in the amount, whatever you want. Sky's the limit, anything you want. So Mucukunda then replies, as we heard, that his nature is very humble. And so he speaks of himself in self-deprecating ways. He says bad things about himself and how he wasted so much time, like all of us, not properly utilizing this valuable opportunity given, human form of life and everything else. So let's hear what he has to say. O Lord, the people of this world, both men and women, are bewildered by your illusory energy. Unaware of their real benefit, they do not worship you, but instead seek happiness by engaging themselves in family affairs which are actually sources of misery. That person has an impure mind who, despite having somehow or other automatically obtained the rare and highly evolved human form of life, does not worship your lotus feet. Like an animal that has fallen into a blind well, such a person has fallen into the darkness of a material home. Now, this isn't speaking of devotees, it's speaking of those that don't have any sense of God consciousness. I have wasted all this time, O unconquerable one, becoming more and more intoxicated by my domain and opulence as an earthly king, misidentifying the mortal body as the self, becoming attached to children, wives, treasury, and land. I suffered endless misery, anxiety. With deep arrogance, I took myself to be the body, which is a material object like a pot or a wall. Thinking myself a god among men, I traveled the earth surrounded by my charioteers, elephants, cavalry, foot soldiers, and generals, disregarding you. In my deluding pride, a man obsessed with thoughts of what he thinks needs to be done, intensely greedy and delighting in sense enjoyment, is suddenly confronted by you, who are ever alert. Like a hungry snake licking its fangs before a mouse, you appear before him as death. The body that at first rides high on fierce elephants and chariots adorned with gold is known by the name King, as later by your inconceivable power of time called feces, worms, and ashes. Having conquered the entire circle of directions and being thus free of conflict, a man sits on a splendid throne, receiving praise from leaders who were once his equals, but when he enters the women's chamber where sense pleasure is found, he is led around like a pet animal, O Lord. A king who desires even greater power than he already has strictly performs his duties, carefully practicing austerity and forgetting sense enjoyment. But he whose urges are so rampant, thinking, I am independent and supreme, cannot attain happiness. Just a few more verses. When the material life of a wandering soul has ceased, O Achyuta, he may attain the association of your devotees. Here we go. And when he associates with them, there awakens in him devotion unto you, who are the goal of the devotees and the Lord of all causes and their effects. My Lord, I think you have shown me mercy since my attachment to my kingdom has spontaneously ceased. Such freedom is prayed for by saintly rulers of vast empires who desire to enter the forest for a life of solitude. O all-powerful one, I desire no boon other than service to your lotus feet, the boon most eagerly sought by those free from material desire. O Hari, what enlightened person who worships you, the giver of liberation, would choose a boon that causes his own bondage? Therefore, O Lord, having put aside all objects of material desire, which are bound to the modes of passion, ignorance, and goodness, I am approaching you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for shelter. You are not covered by mundane designations. Rather, you are the Supreme Absolute Truth, full of pure knowledge and transcendental to the material modes. Last, for a long time I have been pained by troubles in this world, and have been burning with lamentation. My 6 enemies are never satiated, and I can find no peace. Therefore, O giver of shelter, O Supreme Soul, please protect me. O Lord, In the midst of danger, I have good fortune, by good fortune, approached your lotus feet, which are the truth, and which make one fearless and free of sorrow. Pretty eloquent. This is one of those verses, and I'm going to pay attention to one of the words in this verse. When the material life of a wandering soul has ceased, O Achyuta, he may attain the association of your devotees. When he associates with them, there awakens in him devotion unto you, who are the goal of devotees and the Lord of all causes and their effects. Now, this is discussed in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and those of you that are listening carefully, you'll understand that the cause and effect are reversed. Because cessation of material life doesn't come before the association of devotees. Rather, the association of devotees brings about the cause of the cessation of material existence. So, in discussing this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's an explicit error, and in literature, it's a literary ornament or an alankar, when something is in reverse order for extreme emphasis. It's the association of the Lord's devotees that enables one to transcend material existence, not the other way around. So ati shayokti is an apparent inversion of sequence. That's in this verse. The merciful association of the Lord's devotees makes possible our determination to become Krishna conscious. I don't know how many of you have heard from experienced devotees saying something like this. You know, I've been chanting for so long, X number of years, and I don't feel that I'm so much closer to Krishna now than when I started chanting. Maybe in the initial stages of chanting, there was a big spike, but then something happened and the same degree of progress was not taking place. Why is that? Maybe you've heard that from devotees. And if you haven't heard it, you'll probably experience it yourselves. This is one of the important takeaways from this whole Mucukunda story is the importance of devotee association. To start bhakti and to further in bhakti, or have the determination to go further in bhakti. Now, reading Prabhupada's books is one way to get that association, because it's association with Prabhupada, and he's assimilating, synthesizing commentaries of acharyas, so we're getting their association also. Regularly read Prabhupada's books, and you'll get his association. And be in the association of devotees where you hear and discuss the same teachings, just like we're doing right now. It's an impetus to become more determined, to not just do some sadhana, but determination to become Krishna conscious in the course of that sadhana, to achieve that purpose. That's an important. I like this story for that reason. Now, conclusion. We're going to hear how Krishna responds. The Supreme Lord said, "O Emperor, O great ruler, your mind is pure and potent. Though I enticed you with benedictions, your mind was not overcome by material desires. Understand that I enticed you with benedictions just to prove that you would not be deceived. The intelligence of my unalloyed devotees is never diverted by material blessings. The minds of non-devotees who engage in such practices as pranayama are not fully cleansed of material desires. Thus, O king, material desires are again seen to arise in their minds. Conclusion. Wander this earth at will, with your mind fixed on me. May you always possess such unfailing devotion for me. Because you followed the principles of a Kshatriya, you killed living beings while hunting and performing other duties. You must vanquish the sins thus incurred by carefully executing penances while remaining surrendered to me. O king, in your very next life, you'll become an excellent Brahmana, the greatest well-wisher of all creatures, and certainly come to me alone. Interesting. So, I know a devotee that's conducting discussions with Western audience, and he customized a 3-part presentation on this story, calling it the blank check. Because, people can relate to money. So Krishna was testing him, but of course he knew how he would respond. And sometimes that happens in life. It's the nature of Krishna. Although he knows how we're going to respond, sometimes something. Sometimes it looks like good, sometimes it looks like bad. But for the devotee, their relationship with Krishna is all good and anything else is not of consequence. So there are examples where Krishna even tested the gopis. How did Krishna test the gopis? He was absent from the gopis. He wanted to see, and he examined to see how they would respond. Or he examined Rukmini by teasing Rukmini, saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have married a person like me. You're so elevated, and I'm so unworthy of you. Maybe you should find another good qualified husband." And she fainted. Now, the spiritual teaching is that Krishna never tests us beyond our capacity to pass the test. That's explicitly expressed in relation to the story of Bali Maharaj. You know the story of Bali Maharaj, and after he surrendered everything, Vamana had him tied up, and he didn't protest, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, I surrendered everything, now you're tying me up like a criminal." But then Vamana said, everyone was around stating their opinion about whether this was right or not. He said, "I did this just to show how exalted." And Prabhupada comments that Krishna will sometimes put the devotee in some difficulty. But it's never beyond their capacity to handle, and he'll always give them protection. Always. Always. The Supreme Lord said, "O Emperor, O great ruler, your mind is pure and potent. Though I entice you with benedictions, your mind was not overcome by material desire." So here's a painting of Krishna testing Rukmini. The other attendants are there, and Rukmini is about to faint, hearing Krishna's words, thinking he's asking me to leave him. Or when Krishna was hiding from the gopis, they were going mad. And he wanted to see the display of their intense love for him. Here's another Krishna hiding behind a curtain, seeing the intensity of the love of the gopis and their feelings of separation for him. Another such painting. Beautiful paintings. Because Krishna knows the hearts of his devotees, so sometimes to enhance or inflame their feelings of love for him, he'll make himself not visible before them. Now, sometimes, in this concluding message, sometimes a king is engaged in killing animals for the purpose of practicing protection. Because you followed the principles of a Kshatriya, you killed living beings while hunting and performing other duties. You must vanquish the sins thus incurred by carefully executing penances while remaining surrendered to me. Now, two things. Krishna could have wiped the slate clean. Why didn't he? We don't know. He may have had some purpose for some future service for Mucukunda, and so he engaged him in that, whatever that future service was. One possibility. Another possibility is Krishna wanted to give an instruction through his interaction with Mucukunda for us. Now, in principles of Dharma, if you engage in your duties of Dharma, then there's no sin. Arjun's killing in the Kurukshetra battlefield, no sin. A Kshatriya who is by duty permitted to practice his skill of protecting persons who need protection may hunt. There's no sin. Now he's speaking as if there is, so that's puzzling. But don't be violent. And there's consequences. So now the conclusion that's found in Vishnu Purana is, here is the statement in the Bhagavatam: you'll become a Brahmana in your next life after undergoing purification for your sins. Vishnu Purana says he went to the Himalayas, and specifically he went to Badrinath, and even says as he was walking, leaving Mathura, his body was so big that people were afraid. They started running in all directions. He was like a giant. Vishnu Purana says he went to Gandhamandana mountain and Badrikashram. Now, I know where Gandhamandana mountain is because we just discussed it the other day in Jambudweep. It's one of the mountain ranges in Jambudweep. And for the life of me, I could not find where is Gandhamandana mountain. Now, this is an image meant to show that's Gandhamandana mountain over there on the left. And he went to Badrikashram. And while he was in Badrikashram, he perfected his spiritual life. And according to the Bhagavatam, he then became a qualified Brahmana, served in a devoted way, served Krishna, and returned to the spiritual world by Krishna's grace. One of the persons who I have a close, a devotee friend, is Bhakti Chaitanya Swami. And because he and I were planning this Kartik month, we were planning to do a yatra together in Vrindavan. And now it's going to be a virtual yatra to Vrindavan. But in the course of our interaction, he said, if you haven't yet taken a group to Badrinath, please go at least once. So he said, I'll share with you the images because he's a photographer, took many photographs and description of the places. And it's not a full, 10-day long yatra, but it's a very special place, very sacred place. Many, many, many great personalities went there for purification in the concluding stages of their life. Many. So one day we'll go there. And I was spending some time trying to find out when's the best time to go. And the best time to go is not when it's the best time to go. Because when the weather is really nice, there's a zillion people there. So it's like jam-packed and, not the best time to go. So just before and just after is good. But it's a short window of time because you see from the photograph, it's way up there in the mountains. And just before that is rain and there's mudslides. And just after that is so much snow you can't move. So we'll have to figure it out how it's going to happen. And you have to wait till the pandemic is over. Because not going anywhere in this condition. So that's where Mucukunda went, according to Vishnu Purana. His qualities are wonderful, but for me, especially outstanding is just by hearing. His mind became very strong. By Gargamuni's association, his mind became very strong, very determined, very purposeful. Although he continued conducting his duties externally in the world, his mind was very focused on that goal, meeting Krishna. And such a nice example. I like that example from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, when carpenter isn't an elevated profession. It's a nice profession, but it's not particularly a purified occupation type. But he just followed and desired to have Krishna as his son. And so Krishna fulfilled. So what's our desire? We're doing our duties and doing our sadhana and living our lives, and time moves and children grow up and things happen and we get old and things happen, and what's going on inside? Are we getting closer to that ultimate goal of life? And the answer, however we invest ourselves, that's going to determine what the next life is, or the destination of being with Krishna or not. So it's now. It's not, later I'll do it. It's an important lesson. Let's see if there's some discussion. Okay, do we have a portable microphone? Wait, because we have online people, probably. We have a portable microphone, so they can also hear you.
Maharaj, was the carpenter's son also Mucukunda, or you said later that he was a Ishwaku dynasty person?
No, the carpenter story is totally different than Mucukunda. Mucukunda was the son of Mandata, who was a king in the Ishwaku dynasty. They're totally different. That was just an example given as a commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of what happens when you do your worldly duties and you have a specific desire in relation to Krishna, it will happen. And it happened in his case. That two different.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
I was a little confused initially.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So once I was listening to Bhakti Charu Maharaj's class, so he was also saying that I don't know who Krishna is, but I just know who Srila Prabhupada is, and his life was completely dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. So practically speaking, also sometimes it feels like Krishna is there, but it is very practical to be attached to devotees, Krishna's devotees, and serving them. So it just feels that that can be like the focus can be so strong and the service can be so strong when you're attached to the devotees directly. So if you can just comment on that too.
Well, sure. The attachment to devotees, it fits in with the whole overall message that I was trying to convey. That to me, this story conveys is the association to devotees is everything, and being attached to the devotees is what it means. To, rendering service unto and being attached to those persons who we're serving is devotional life. Those devotees are attached to Krishna. So, taking Bhakti Chamaraj's statement, I don't know Krishna. I mean, he knows so many things about Krishna because of his association with Prabhupada and his association with the scriptures. He was very, very well read. He was one of the go-to persons when I come across a puzzle about what does the scripture say about such and such. So he did know about Krishna, but his primary focus in Krishna consciousness was his relationship with Prabhupada. But that, because Prabhupada connected with Krishna, that connects one with Krishna. So be connected with devotees who are connected to Krishna, you're connected to Krishna. But it's true in his case. Very, very attached to Prabhupada. Very attached. And that carries one to Krishna. Because where's Prabhupada? He's engaged in Krishna service wherever he is. So likely that's where Bhakti Chamaraj is. He's somewhere where Prabhupada is serving Krishna. Because of that attachment and dedication and service. Anything else? Over here.
Maharaj, there is one question online.
Okay.
If you could please again repeat, who was Garga's son who troubled Yadu dynasty?
Who was what?
Who was Garga's son who troubled Yadu dynasty?
Who was Garga's son?
Who troubled Yadu dynasty?
His name was Kaliyavana. Gargya became the father of Kaliyavana. It's odd. Gargamuni was such an advanced person. His son wasn't as advanced as his father was. His son got into a get back mentality, get back at the Yadu dynasty. So Gargya became the father of a demon. That was a benediction that he wanted from Lord Shiva. Okay. There's a question over here. Okay.
Hari Kamaraj. No, you mentioned that the devotee association comes first and the cessation of material
Existence comes after, yes.
on that. Just a comment, if Prabhupada came to America, then only the cessation of people became
Exactly.
devotees,
Exactly.
not the other way around.
Exactly. And his emphasis wasn't give up material stuff. His emphasis was chant, take prasadam, and hear Bhagavad Gita. Receive Krishna, bhakti, and the material desires will fade. Okay. That's it. Srila Prabhupada ki. Oh, we have something? One more?
So even in the story of Mucukunda, it seems like later he did get an opportunity where he was completely dedicated, and then he went back to pilgrimage to Badrikashram and all that. So sometimes I always wonder that in this stage of life, when you're so busy with so many activities and all of that, so is it that there will come a point where you will get an opportunity to be completely dedicated, spend more time, and because it's really always, I feel, is directly proportional to the amount of time you're able to dedicate, the amount of time you're able to read scriptures and all of that. I feel the elevation of consciousness will happen. So I just wanted to know if that's something.
There's a nice verse, I think it's text 61 from Brahma Samhita. Take the microphone. Where your question, well, the topic of purification while involved in worldly duties was concerned that Brahma had in Brahma Samhita. After all of his prayers, the final verses is Krishna's addressing that doubt. If I engage in building a universe as worldly affairs, it may take my mind away from all these wonderful realizations I've had before I started building a universe. But if I don't do my duty, then that's neglect, and that's not good either. So what to do? So those 5 verses explain, and just paraphrasing, keep it simple. Bhaktisiddhanta writes that those activities that are joined with hearing and chanting are as purifying as the direct hearing and chanting. In fact, he doesn't write this, but the senses and the mind need to become cleansed. There's worldly duties because the mind, it needs to be cleansed, and the senses need to be cleansed. And if we don't do them, then the cleansing doesn't take place. And that was one of the statements by Mucukunda. The persons who engage in Ashtanga, they're denying the senses and they're engaged in meditation, but their desires aren't becoming purified. So those who have worldly duties should do them because it's needed purification for the mind and senses. And that will then qualify us at some point in time to not do all those duties. It's a stage of life. When children are grown, etc., then it's recommended that one pulls back from those duties and does more singular devotion. But it doesn't necessitate going to Badrikashram. It's engaging in direct devotional activities such as preaching or teaching or just receiving and giving Krishna bhakti. That's a stage of life. And the earlier stage of life is purification of the mind and senses by performance of prescribed duties and offering the results to Krishna. That's a Bhagavad Gita message, and you know because you've been attending the morning classes. It's a Uddhava Gita message also. We're not qualified to just be in a solitary place and just be focused, have the mind completely absorbed in Krishna. We'd be restless. We wouldn't be able to do it. It's not recommended for us. This other is recommended for us. And your question, don't begrudge, I have so many duties and I wanted to hear and chant. It's purification this way and purification that way. Bhaktisiddhanta writes, they're as purifying when joined with direct devotional activity. And so don't be resentful about those duties. It's for purification. It's to help qualify you for that later stage. Because some other people, when they get to the later stage, what do? They buy a mobile home and go traveling around the country and take pictures of stuff. And go camping and, they go on vacations and go to Hawaii and do whatever go to Disneyland. Go visit Niagara Falls. Just see the wonders of the world and travel here and there and die. So, our life is different, devotional life. But to be capable of entering into that more focused and dedicated stage of life, there's purification. It's like, a kid going to school. Oh, I don't like doing all this homework. Can we give you the portable microphone so people online can hear?
So, question is, how do you know you are on right track of purification?
How do you know you're on the right track for?
Purification.
Mahajano Yena Katasa Panta. You follow the great souls. And, start with Bhagavad Gita. You follow the indications, because that's what Bhagavad Gita is for. It's for us to know, are we on the right track? You follow the guidelines given, and you're on the right track. And stay in the association of devotees who can tap you on the shoulder if you start going off track. Back there? In the corner, pass it around.
Maharaj, sometimes I find that when we are praying and going about life as such, the soul starts to collect new imprints. I find like new desires, new things coming in that you probably didn't have. And so I remember that time I remind myself to say, okay, the Gita shloka, to say the Urdhva Moolam Adha Shakam, right? I try to think of it as leaves and roots and try to give up and try to not get into it deep, because people in this material life, it's all about passion. Be passionate about things, and when you're associating with material things, I'm trying to dissociate and say, okay, don't get sucked too much into this, right? Is that the right way to think about going through this? It's
half right. Okay, the other, I'd say half right in this sense. The other half is that which gives spiritual Shakti. So the staying away from is automatically accomplished by absorption in the positive. You stay away from asat by absorption in sat. And that's protection. Then it's not like a struggle. It's just, a smile. And you're protected by that absorption in sat. So find ways that work for you, that out of all the activities of bhakti, and in the association with others who give you enlivenment in bhakti, let me, regulate and invest in those activities with those persons, because it gives me spiritual strength and enlivenment and enthusiasm. And then, because when you're in that you're vulnerable if that spiritual strength isn't vibrant. And the external energy is always in flux. Like, so there's always something different, but it's not something different, it just looks different. It's just, using Prabhupada's phrase, old wine in the same bottle. Or in a different bottle. So, here's another way of saying kind of the same thing. Indifference to matter is incomplete. It's only half, unless there's the indifference toward Krishna changes. The indifference toward Krishna will make you more susceptible to matter, as opposed to indifference to the variegated parade of things that go by in life, one after the next. Adjust the indifference to Krishna factor by the positive devotional activities and the right association, and find ones that work for you, and you can I got it. You can adjust as we go along. Can you pass it? You can refine and recalibrate, and you'll get your compass out, and start moving a little more in this direction instead of that direction, kind of thing. But make sure that the alignment with Krishna is vibrant, and the connection is strong, and then the other half is the detachment. Go ahead.
Maharaj, I don't really understand what purification is.
You want a definition or an explanation?
Like an explanation.
Okay. Here's a simple one, and then there's then another one that's more subtle. Gold may have alloys. And one of the ways that they deal with making gold, higher quality, or X carats, is fire. And then when the gold has alloys, the alloys and fire separate out. So then you end up with just pure gold. Okay. Another explanation is the modes of nature. That's more subtle. Modes of nature, this is a teaching in the 5th canto, Rishabdev, that the mind that's not pure is colored. Just like, let's say, there's a light bulb up there in the kitchen ceiling. Supposing we painted that pink, or supposing we painted it blue, or some other color. No, the filament or whatever is generating the light, it's not blue or pink or yellow, but there's a covering over, and the modes of nature are like that. It's coloring. The mind also becomes colored. And so we don't see things as they really are. We see things according to the coloring, the mode of nature in which we're involved. Passionate people see things that's this way, and ignorant people see things that way, and mode of goodness people see things. So, but it's all different colorings of the mind and senses. And then there's a stage where you don't have that modes of nature influence anymore. Like gold that's now pure gold. So purification is working through the lower modes, heading towards the upper modes, and staying for some time in goodness and then reaching towards transcendence. And that transcendence is the position where Krishna is. So by association with Krishna, one becomes purified. One becomes qualified to see him as he is, experience his association. Because otherwise, one who is not purified, even if Krishna were standing before somebody, they wouldn't recognize. That happened. Okay. Thank you very much. Nice evening together. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.